Welcome back to the Equipped for Life podcast. We are here with Monica Snyder from Secular for Life again for round 2 of lightning round, slow-mo lightning round, whatever we're calling this. We're going to answer a bunch of questions from your audience, and we're going to try to do it relatively quickly. We've got some more. Let's just get into it. What's the next question?
Okay, next question. How do people still argue that the fetus isn't alive?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of thoughts on this. So one, typically, I think when pro-choice people say the fetus is not alive, they don't mean what you think it means. They don't mean the biologically alive thing. They mean it's not a valuable life yet. It's not really alive. It's not capital A alive, like whatever. But there's this equivocation thing where we think they mean biological life. They occasionally do. YouTube commenters, you've convinced me. There are those people.
Yeah, there are people who they do mean it the way you think they mean it, yes. But that's not probably most of the time.
Even your internet comment
It does happen, though. It does happen.
I'm agreeing it does happen. But we agree that it's not most of the time at this point. And so probably you don't know what they mean.
Sometimes they don't know what they mean. So we just had someone recently on one of our channels or whatever. And he said, the fetus isn't alive. What do you mean? And he's like, you can't be alive until you are an individual. Well, what do you mean by individual? Because biologically it's an individual, right? But what do you mean? Well, you can't be an individual until you aren't living off of someone else's body. So now we're in this 3 layers of whatever it does mean, it probably...
Can they breastfeed and still be an individual?
Whatever you do mean, you probably don't mean it is not a growing, living thing.
Right.
Just like you could see, a tulip, and that probably the person you're talking to, you'd be like, is this tulip alive? And they'd be like, yes, of course it's alive. That's probably not what they're saying.
Right.
But I don't know if they do know what they mean. Or maybe you have to ask more clarifying questions.
Yeah.
But how'd you go from alive to individual to using someone's body?
Yeah.
What is happening?
Try to ask some clarification questions. And you might disagree with me, but I was going to say, try to ask, at least initially, some clarification questions in a not snarky way. Because it's I'm just not, it's so easy to be like, it's not really, it's not growing. What do you mean? Versus, so I'm not sure what you mean by alive. That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Right. It's also easier to come off non-snarky in person because all of your intonation and whatever. Yes. I can say things genuinely not trying to be snarky online and people still could get mad at me because you lose all that. I told you about this. Just recently had someone say, whatever they said. I think someone said the fetus is not an individual, it's science. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you know perfectly well what I mean. Stop with the bad faith questions. And I'm like, oh, okay. I feel like that's not a useful, endeavor.
I wonder if it's, so that's super, okay. So do you think that just, again, because of how society, culture, language evolves, that maybe at this point, the forward phrase, what do you mean, has lost its usefulness, and you actually have to have more.
I ask people what they mean all the time, and usually they don't freak out. I think most of the time it works.
Okay.
I'm just saying online it's easier for people to input whatever they think you're doing, and without your tone, without your cadence, without your hand gestures.
So I'm going to argue with you. So because this is my point is, if I had responded, I don't think I ever typed those 4 words in anything that would be remotely like a text debate. I would have said something. I would have used more language. It would have been longer.
You can't use more language. It's a very limited character amount. So
okay, you literally don't have any more space than
not literally none more, but it's more limited than Twitter. It's very difficult. I actually don't do much TikTok comment interaction because they make it really difficult.
So I'll just concede that TikTok is its own thing because I don't know TikTok comments. I don't know the limitations. Yeah. But anywhere else where there's not the I
YouTube,
can find
you can do paragraphs
even
on
with
YouTube.
Twitter. You can do a thread. You can do things.
Right.
If I've got to spend more effort explaining myself in this kind of where I think some people would be like this obnoxious Josh Brahm way where you're using 5 times more words than you need to just get to the point. Okay, but it is way less likely that they're going to think I'm being snarky, even though it's just text.
I agree. But what I'm saying is you have to put in that extra effort online more than in person.
If you want to make clarity your responsibility, which is our view, which is I'm not just making it my responsibility to understand you. I'm going to make it my responsibility for you to understand me as much as possible.
So we're very different about this.
Okay.
But there are times when I want to make clarity my responsibility, if only because I genuinely want to figure out what are you doing? And they're not going to tell me, and they're not going to open up to me and explain if they think that I'm trying to get them. So sometimes I have my own reasons and incentive beyond just being a nice person to make those clarifications. A lot of times it's enough to just say, listen, serious question, blah, 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 you know? And people will kind of, okay, she's seriously asking. But
and the further you're into a dialogue with someone where it starts feeling like, okay, we're both acting in good faith and we don't hate each other, then I think you can start getting away with the shorter, quippier responses.
I had an experience recently, and it was not on purpose, but it made me wonder if this would be a useful thing to do on purpose, where I was talking to 3 different people at the same time in different threads on Twitter. Huge mistake. I almost never even respond on Twitter, but for reasons I was. And I got 2 of them confused. So one of them made a claim, something to the effect of late term. I'm making this up, but it was something to the effect of late term abortion is 21 weeks or later. And the other one had made a claim like late term abortion is in the 3rd trimester. Okay. Different things. Yeah. Right. I got them confused. So in the second situation, she said something. I was like, but you said 21 weeks or later, and now you're saying this. And I posted it. And then I realized my mistake. Yeah. It ended up being a good thing because I came back immediately. I was like, you know what? I'm sorry. Yeah. You did not say that. I'm talking to too many people at once. Yeah. You said this. My bad. And her whole demeanor changed because I had the opportunity to be like, I had the opportunity. And this wasn't a strategy. It's just that, like we said earlier, if we mess up, I don't delete it. Right. So her whole demeanor changed. She's like, oh, I've done that many times myself on Twitter. And then for the rest of that conversation, she wasn't like totally wonderful to me, but she got way more polite. She was answering my questions much more straightforwardly. And I wasn't trying to argue with her. I was trying to figure out what she was saying. And at the end of it, I was like, well, thanks for walking me through that because I really didn't understand before. And she was like, no problem. Now, she's one of our cadre of Twitter trolls. And in the week since then, she's reverted back to, but for the moment. And so I was like, I have never done this, but I was like, I could screw up on purpose just so that I could be like, my bad. And then maybe that helps people. But then I know that's not very honest, but like.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I definitely understand the pragmatic argument for it. And I wonder if you could accomplish the same thing other way.
You're giving them something. Yeah. In a rhetorical way, you're like conceding some chips and that makes them calm down.
Find ways to either, concede a good point or do something self-deprecating or I think there are different ways to get that same reaction from the person.
So another thing I've started doing a lot, and I think of you every time actually, is when a pro-choice person comes onto our content and agrees with anything, all I do is say, I always appreciate common ground. And that's it. I don't say anything else. Hoping that they'll stick around, hoping that I'm building rapport. Yeah. I don't say, I appreciate common ground, but what about this? I just literally appreciate common ground. Bam, done. And it has 2 effects. First of all, that's what I'm saying to them. But also, especially on TikTok, the way TikTok's comments are, you as the profile they're commenting on, your comments are really highlighted more than on Twitter. Right. And so then it's also all the other pro-lifers can see it. And usually it gets a lot of likes. I think there is a lot of space where people would love to have more understanding, Yep. So for the alive thing, there are people who do mean it biologically. I don't think that's the majority of the time. Most of the time you need to clarify and see if they're just talking about personhood arguments. For the people who do mean it biologically, how do they still think that? I don't know. Yeah. I think it's just biological miseducation, misunderstanding what organisms are, misunderstanding definitions of life, misunderstanding how we are defining homeostasis. Like people be like, there's no homeostasis because if you put them in this completely different environment, they die. And I'm like, that is not how that works, But for the most part, I think it's a clarification issue, usually.
We've got a whole module of the Equip for Life course talking about the biological part. Like when you're in this part of the debate and when you do need to defend the biological side, we've got some thoughts. We even added a lesson on what do you do with the obnoxious eternal skeptic that's just like, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know? It's like, I've got a technique that, it's like, here's one more thing you can try. We've got some stuff.
Right. Okay. Next question. This is an important one and a tough one. How do you combat viral misinformation? This is okay. Listen, this is huge. Okay, because I believe that the pro-life movement would basically have won a long time ago if we had the same size megaphone as the other side. I really believe that. Okay, maybe. And so there's another way of of saying, I say megaphone, but you say viral misinformation. So here's a great example. The Guardian came out a couple weeks ago with that article called, what a pregnancy actually looks like before 10 weeks in pictures.
Yeah.
Okay. And what
you guys
they meant,
had a great post on
what
this.
they meant when they said that was what aborted tissue that has been rinsed of all blood looks like before 10 weeks in pictures. And I don't know if you know this, Josh, but those are not actually the same thing.
No, it's not at all.
So we did a response, which for us, for our platform, for our audience, went viral. And by that, I mean it got a lot more views and a lot more reposts, right? And that is on one level very satisfying. But what is viral for us is still orders of magnitude smaller than how far the Guardian article itself actually went. What do I do about that? As far as I know, I can't do anything about that. So what do we do about viral misinformation? My answer is you do what you can do. And what you can do is educate yourself and talk to other people about it. If you happen to be a content creator or in a group, get to know your platforms and how the algorithms work so that your stuff goes a little bit further. Another different example, this one has been around for at least 7 years. Do you know Tapeworm Harry? So as a contrasting example, I'm pretty sure this first came out like 7 years ago. I call him Tapeworm Harry. It is a tweet from a guy named Harry. And he says, if any of you pro-lifers get tapeworms, you better suck it up and be a good host because tapeworms have a heartbeat and they feel pain. It deserves a choice and it chose you to be its mother. That sounds idiotic in like 5 ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the problem. It's still viral. And it wasn't just viral the first time it went up. Like once every 12 to 18 months, it goes viral again. And then people send it to us like, how do we respond to this? And so
seriously?
Oh yeah. There's no end to the ridiculousness of Twitter.
The things that I missed by doing my outreaches on college campuses.
Right. No,
Monica.
so I call him Tapeworm Harry. And we have on our website, secularprolife.org, and there's like 100 of them. The first one is Tapeworm Harry, because I know when people go here, that's going to be one of the ones looking for him because he'll never die. He's like a zombie, right? So how do I combat viral misinformation? You tell me. How does this keep happening? So how we combat it is we make a correction, we make a rebuttal post, we make a TikTok, whatever we do, and then we try to make that as accessible as possible for when people will inevitably keep looking for it. And that's all I can do. All you can do as a private person listening to this is educate yourself, know where the material is, pass it along. It does work to some extent. Like I have seen our stuff, quote, in the wild, not sourcing from our website. It happens, but we don't have as big of a megaphone, so we do what we can.
Yeah, I think I basically agree with that. It's upsetting to me. I feel like there are more people. Feel like it is easier to spread viral disinformation or make disinformation viral, and I think it's easier to get people to believe it now.
Just because it's easier to go viral now than 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, but I also think there's also like more confirmation bias now than there once was, and so like, there's layers of problems. There's not going to be like one source or something like that, but the things that immediately come to my mind are you try to make yourself known in your sphere of influence as one of the trustworthy ones.
Yeah, that's true.
As someone who is intellectually honest, who does admit their mistakes publicly when they've accidentally put out something that was false. Someone that is listening to both sides, trying to find truth. And it's like you and then you kind of, it's like leading by example.
Yeah.
And you try to slowly get more and more people living this very different, and by the way, way harder way to live, where you're having to spend a lot of time listening to people that you disagree with and listen to them attacking you and things like that. It's not fun to do this. But I don't know what happens to our society if we stay on the track that we are on right now. If we keep on ending up in this thing where we keep on getting more and more divided from each other, and we keep on thinking that everyone who disagrees with us politically are out to like kill us or steal our children or completely change the country and ruin it or like that kind of thing, the worse this is going to get.
I do want to say one more thing about viral misinformation.
Yeah.
Kind of moving back to specifically the abortion debate in our group.
Yeah.
So you probably have seen this as well, but there are a lot of times when I will put out content responding to things like Tapeworm Harry, and people will say, that's such a straw man. That's in some sense it is. Tapeworm Harry is a terrible, horrible, dumb argument that any pro-choice person who's thought about this for a while would not be posting that, right? But it is not a straw man if a whole bunch of people are literally saying it. That's not a straw man. It might be a straw man of your view, but you are not the only person I'm talking to. Do you get that? I have this problem all the time with some of the more intellectual pro-choice people following us, where they get mad and I'm like, you are not the only person here. Do you understand? I'm not just talking to you. But I think there are basically two categories of arguments we have to respond to. And those are very good arguments, even if they're not particularly popular, because we're like, oh, what does this mean? We have to dig into this. And vastly more common, very common arguments, even if they're not that good. And so you have some of your more intellectual, philosophically inclined pro-choice people who will get frustrated when we respond to these really terrible pro-choice arguments. And we have people on our Facebook page like, all you ever do is straw man. It's not a straw man. I hear it every day. I have people messaging me, how do I respond to this? Every week. And I'm not going to not respond to any of them because you personally wouldn't say this dumb thing. I have to respond to it.
I totally agree with that. I think like the only way that you could do that wrong is if you only focused on the worst pro-choice,
the low-hanging fruit.
And then because there is a thing that, like, part of the problem with mainstream media, especially like the MSNBCs and the Fox News of the world, is that they are both doing the same thing. They're amplifying the dumbest, weirdest people on the other side.
Right.
And that is causing, and that's why so much of like actual America, like your actual neighbors, are not nearly as crazy as you think they are, because they are not like those people. There's like this, because
there's not really even that many of those people.
It's that thing you were talking about earlier. It's like there's the bell curve. And you're only seeing the tails on the news. And that is not most people. Most people are not Twitter people. And so,
well, even Twitter people aren't really Twitter people a lot of the times.
That's and that's also true.
Yeah.
So as long as you're not doing that thing where it's like, okay, we are going to make people think that pro-life makes more sense by only talking about the dumbest pro-choice things, then I'm good. I agree with you. If there's a million people talking and doing the tapeworm Harry thing, which is amazingly stupid, then of course we have to respond to it.
This is also why in a lot of my content, I try to get ahead of this by showing where it's coming from. So TikTok is wonderful, where you can respond to a comment and it links to the original comments. You can see where it's coming from. So if I do one of my conversation style TikToks, a lot of times the pro-choice character will be reading the real comment that happened. And that gets ahead of people being like, nobody says this. This person said it. On Twitter, sometimes I'll screen cap tweets to put in my blog post. I'll try to find the ones that have like 100,000 likes. And I'll include that in the screen cap just so you could see, because you can find anything on Twitter. I could find someone saying anything. I'm trying to show you, that's not what I'm doing. This was viral. This was popular. A whole bunch of people agreed with this. And that's why I'm responding to it. Yeah. And I try to do that to show that that's not what I'm doing. And another way that I try to guard us against this is when people say really offensive, crazy things to me, and people have said all sorts of things to me. People have made fun of my miscarriages. People have claimed that my Christian allies are going to, murder me or something. I don't know, whatever. Pick a thing. It could be anything. I don't repost that stuff because that's crazy. And I don't think most people, think most pro-choice people would ever say something like that. So when I see that, I don't think this is pro-choice people. I think you are crazy.
I think you're handling that so well.
And so a lot of times people get DMs. Pro-life people get DMs, especially pro-life women will get DMs being like, I hope you get raped and then this and this happens. And they'll repost it. And I get that because there's a place for like, this is not okay, calling it out. I'm not begrudging that. But I want to be careful to say this is not okay from this individual.
Right.
And I don't really think
the norm.
And it helps that I have pro-choice friends. Like I said, friendship inoculates you. It prevents you from believing the most ridiculous things. So when I think, what does the average pro-choice person think? I'm not thinking about the crazy DM rape guy. I'm thinking about my study partner from college. And that really helps me be like, okay, chill.
Yeah. All right. Next.
Yes. Okay. The phrase is care or abortion care, and trying to slip pro-abortion stances under the umbrella of healthcare. How do we respond to that?
We've got an article on this. Abortion is not healthcare. It doesn't fit the definitions, the actual definition of healthcare, and we can show that is definitely not. I understand that it makes sense for them to try to keep it under that guise. There's that thing where it makes it sound better than it actually is.
A lot better.
But it's not. I'll link to the article in the description, but because it's kind of technical. You've got to get into, okay, well, let's talk about definitions.
How does one define healthcare?
Let's talk about the issues, all of that. I can't do that off the top of my head right now, but yeah.
And so that's great. You should check it out. The phrase abortion care is one of my greatest pet peeves. It's an affront. It's ridiculous. But also, I think it helps to just be, you don't even have to say, don't say abortion care. Just be very, very clear. It's like in an earlier episode, we were saying, you could say elective abortion, or you could say abortion of healthy fetuses carried by healthy women for no medical reason. Well, in this case, when you say abortion and they say abortion is healthcare, you're like, okay, well, abortion is intentionally killing a human organism. Whatever you may think of that, that is what's happening. And you're being very, very neutrally descriptive.
Yep.
You just push back that way. I try not to get in too many debates with them about the vernacular itself. I want to get to the point.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Very obnoxious phrase.
Yep. Hate it. Next.
Yeah. How can women who are nurturers hold and carry a baby and then imagine the baby being torn to pieces and then not only accept that, but fight for that?
This is an interesting question. Do you think that most pro-choice activists think of abortion tearing a baby to pieces?
No, I don't think that they think that. I think we have found whenever we say dismemberment or we talk about limbs or anything approaching that description, the most common response by far is, well, they almost all happen before the first trimester, before 10 weeks or whatever. The point seeming to be that's not the method, you're being unnecessarily graphic. So no, I think most of them don't think of it that way. And most, in my experience, vast majority of pro-choice people don't want to talk about abortion after the first trimester.
Yep.
They don't want to talk about it. If you try to talk about it, they'll emphasize that it's rare and they will try not to talk about it. So I don't think they think about it and they're like, I'm fine with this. So you're talking about women who are not just defending the right to abortion, but who are actually seeking abortion. And especially if you're talking about later in pregnancy, I think it gets a lot more complicated. I don't think that they are just okay with it most of the time. Some of them are a little bit cavalier maybe, but no, for the most part, I think that it's coming from a place of a lot of pressure, a lot of fear, a lot of grief. I think there's a lot of conflict. We've talked about the Shout Your Abortion page. You would think it would all be, these tales of empowerment and whatever, and there are some, but there are a lot that are deep grief. There's a very common theme of, I don't regret it, but I deeply grieve it. Very common theme. Okay, next one. I want to better understand why abortions, specifically those after the second trimester, are medically necessary. What are the physical and psychological conditions that make it logical to necessitate the termination of the pregnancy?
So what do we mean?
Okay, so first of all, note that this person said after the second trimester. So I'm interpreting that as third trimester.
Correct.
Okay. What would make it medically necessary in the third trimester? So the first issue is when a pro-choice person says, I think it should be legal in the third trimester to save her life. What do they mean by abortion?
Right.
Because it could very well mean, and I've had them tell me this, that they believe in the third trimester, abortion is just early induction of labor. And if the child can live, then they will live. I've had people specifically tell me they believe this is true. And that procedure of early induction of labor with no intentional death, that does happen. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor.
Yeah.
Take it for what it's worth. But one of the most common examples I've seen is preeclampsia, and it's dangerous. And so they will have to induce labor to prevent it from getting worse.
Yep.
And some people say that's an abortion.
Right.
Now you'd be like, well, that's not an abortion. Okay, that's fine. But understand that the person telling you that they want abortion to be legal in the third trimester for these reasons, they might think it's an abortion.
Right.
So what do they mean when they say abortion?
If they mean anything that terminates a pregnancy,
right,
that is a pregnancy termination.
Yes.
Right. And so got to find out what they mean by it. But
then honing in harder,
yeah,
are there situations in the third trimester where the intentional focused death of the fetus is the procedure to save the woman's life?
I think they can happen before viability. Where we cannot save both. And it's not just tubal pregnancies, although that is most of
that's the most common example.
That's the most common situation, but there are other theoretical situations. I'm always just like, if someone tells me they think that there are these situations that are necessary, I'm just like, I'm not a doctor. Tell me about it. Like, give me examples. I will listen.
And I will say too that we've had that conversation and people will give examples that are incorrect. Where it's like that is not the standard response.
Right. And we can fact check and try to, but I'm also like I'm going to be pretty quick to say, look, if there is no way to save them both,
important if,
and her doctor is saying the only way to save her life, or she is a major risk of dying, if we don't do what they call an abortion or whatever you're going to call this thing, then it's justifiable in that situation. Right. I do not think that women should have to commit suicide via pregnancy.
No.
But
or even
if we can save them both,
just get unreasonably close to the danger zone.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but as far as in the third trimester, that is very unlikely. And I want to talk about why.
Yes.
I'm not saying it can never ever happen. I haven't thought of every possible medical situation, but In the third trimester, if you're getting an abortion, you are going through labor and delivery.
Yeah.
You will go through labor and delivery.
Right.
It'll just be of a dead fetus or a dead child.
Right.
So to argue that you need to make the fetus dead and go through labor and delivery in order to save the woman's life, if that's what we're talking about and not just early induction of labor,
right.
No, I don't think so.
It extra doesn't make sense when you consider at that point this is a 3-day long thing.
It's at least 2 days, usually 3 days
of dilation.
Yes, you have to dilate for a long time, and then you have to have the extraction, and a C-section would be vastly faster.
Yep.
So when people say, and this is your guys' purview, okay, all respect, but when people say that abortion is 14 times safer than childbirth, there's a bunch of reasons. They have a great article, about this. Look it up. But even when they say that, even if you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, they are talking about first trimester abortion. They are not talking about third trimester abortion. Third trimester abortion is not safer than childbirth because it is childbirth. It's childbirth, a birthing process. You're not removing that from the situation. So
I think sometimes maybe the most persuasive thing would be to ask this as kind of like a clarification question. Can you help me understand, given that late term or later abortions or whatever phrase we're using here is a 2 to 3 day long procedure, and given that C-sections can be done in less than half an hour, can you help me understand a situation?
Yeah, what's the situation you're imagining?
We need to kill the baby after 2 or 3 days of dilation to save her life, and we couldn't do a C-section.
Yeah.
I just don't understand what that situation would be.
And I think a lot of times the people saying this, I don't think they have any specific situation in mind. They've heard a lot of medical professionals and a lot of activists say, we need to have this available in case her life is in danger. And they agree the same way you agree. Well, if that's true, I don't want her to die.
Right.
But I've definitely asked people before, what do you mean? What situation? They have no idea.
Yes.
In fact, there was a really great exchange a couple years ago where a woman in Virginia was proposing to expand the reasons you could get an abortion later in pregnancy. And she was having to defend her proposition to some politician, some legislator. And she was saying, what about if it's medically necessary? And he's like, well, like what?
Yeah.
And she had no answer. And then she said, I'm not a doctor, but maybe this person can answer. And they had a NARAL lobbyist come up. And her answer was, I'm not a doctor. Okay. And I was like, you guys didn't see this question coming. And then they started to try to talk about issues of fetal anomaly. And I literally sent a thank you note to the guy that asked these questions. He was very calm and got right to the point. I was very impressed. But he said, okay, I am not talking about issues of fetal anomaly.
Yeah.
You said to save her life.
Yeah.
What do you mean? And they did not have one single example. And they were putting this legislation forward. So I'm very skeptical, very, very skeptical. If it's in the third trimester, very skeptical.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Next.
Okay. How can we keep the conversation on track and prevent distraction from the central point, which is the question, should we or should we not be killing the unborn?
I have thoughts.
Yes, this is you. You go.
Okay. So a really common, frustrating thing when, in not just the debate, but abortion debate specific, is when pro-choice people will ping pong ball back and forth between the personhood thing and the body.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're talking about persons. Like, well, I'm happy to. Like, whatever is most helpful to you, I'm happy to go there. So I'll be doing that. Make the equal rights argument. I'm starting to kind of
Well, it doesn't matter if they're a person or not because no one can use your body against your will.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So, because if that's true, then it doesn't matter what I just said. Because we're role playing now. Okay, so let's talk about that. And then fast forward, I've just made some arguments. I've just talked about how you've got to be an extremist.
Well, they're not a violinist because they're not a person. So this is moot.
Right. Okay. So, and this is what happens. So after a couple of these, what I will do is I'll be like, okay, let's have a meta conversation.
What is happening right now?
Okay. Here's what I'm observing. You tell me if you disagree. But what I feel like is happening here is we've got these two disagreements that are both very, very integral to the abortion debate. And by the way, you can win on just one of them and you win the whole thing.
And yet you aren't.
I have to beat you on both.
And yet you aren't.
And so I don't care which one of these we do first. I think ultimately we should probably talk about both of them. You can pick whichever. I'm not trying to control the conversation. All I'm asking is, can we camp on one of them and not keep going back and forth? Because if we keep on doing 2 minutes here, then 2 minutes here, then 2 minutes here, we will not get anywhere. And I could do the same thing to you.
That is such a kind, generous way for you to do that. That would not have crossed my mind.
That's what we do. Like,
not
can we
crossed my
please
mind.
just camp on one?
Listen, we could we could stick to one, and I'm not changing it until you either refute me or
I don't
accept.
do that. As soon as they feel like
Defend
you're trying to control the conversation,
get serious.
They're gone.
Okay. This is why you guys listen to Equal Rights Institute in terms of practical dialogue tips. We don't pretend to have practical dialogue tips.
It goes completely against most of our colleagues in apologetics. We'll talk about, no, you should try to control the conversation. Stay in the driver's seat. Try to, because you know where you want things to go. And I just feel like
just makes people feel defensive.
It's not subtle anymore. They can tell what you're doing, and it turns them off.
And it doesn't feel like a genuine conversation. It feels like a chess game.
Yes. And frankly, it's kind of like, look, and I've said this before. If I'm talking to a pro-choice college student on a campus at an outreach, this is not a fair fight, okay? Like, I'm acting like it's a fair fight to them. I'm not trying to act like, you know how many of these I've done? Like, I want them to feel like they actually could.
But we're obsessed with this.
They are very unlikely to be able to make a better pro-choice argument than I can.
Right.
So I understand that. And so given that, this is where, like, just like I'm willing to let clarity become my responsibility instead of having it be a 50-50 thing, I am willing to let them, generally speaking, with a few exceptions, but generally speaking, I'm willing to let them push the conversation where they feel like they need it to go.
Right.
Even if sometimes that means changing the topic. There are times, and I did this at the Students for Life conference a while ago, where it's like, if they bring up gay marriage, yes, that might be because they feel more confident in that debate and they want to nail you.
Why would they bring up gay marriage?
Sometimes, no, this happens. Sometimes you're doing really well in the abortion debate, and it's like, what do you think about gay marriage? This happens because if they think that you are a bigot in general, then they have an excuse to not take your other view seriously.
So funny. I've never had anyone ask me that, and I feel like I'd be like,
Christian pro-lifers, this happens a lot.
It's fine. What do you think? Why are you asking?
But for a lot of the Christians, they're not cool with it. So it becomes a thing. And whereas a lot of the Christian pro-life apologists would be like, no, don't let them do that. Be like, nope, we're doing this. I'll be like, maybe the reason they brought that up is because they've never heard someone explain why they could be opposed to gay marriage without being a bigot.
Yeah, it could be your equivalent of people wanting to talk to me about why I'm an atheist. Yes. They haven't had a chance to ask someone in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that.
I'm not.
So I will generally let them maneuver the conversation unless I feel like they are acting in bad faith. If I feel like they're acting in bad faith, I will sometimes take a more involved role of where we're going.
So let me reflect what it sounds like you're saying to this person.
Just to finish the point. What I'm saying is, since I feel like I can basically handle this wherever they take it, I don't feel the need to control the conversation. I can handle it even if they take it in a way that is less strategic for the pro-life universe.
Well, actually, you made me think of something. So not everyone does this for a living, right? And there's probably a lot of people that don't feel like they could go anywhere with it. But I want to liberate our listeners here to say that if it's a sincere, if it's in a good faith conversation, I agree with what you said. Kind of let them take it where they need to take it.
Right.
And if you don't have an answer, you could say, I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that.
Yes.
Feel empowered.
Absolutely.
Another thing too, and this is not specific to the abortion debate. You could say, I'm not sure. I have to think about that. You can also say, I am very skeptical of what you just said, but I'm not positive. You don't have to. You don't have to
totally
say,
fine.
I have these citations, so you're wrong. And if I don't have the citations, I have to agree with you.
Right.
Those aren't the two options. It would be very normal for you to be like, I don't think that's true.
Right.
But be willing to admit if it ends up being true.
Right.
You know, it's fine.
Let's trade contact info. I'm going to go and research it. And I know this almost never works. They almost never do. But it's like, at least try.
But if you're having the conversation with your friends.
Yes,
if you're having a conversation with your friends, and they say something, it doesn't have to be the abortion debate. They could be like, you know, whatever. I'm not even going to pick an example. I have done that all the time. It's a topic I am not an expert on at all, or don't know anything about.
Right.
And all the time I'll be like, no, I don't think that's true. And I will tell you, 40% of the time, it is true. Okay?
Yes.
I'm usually right. Not all the time. You know? And then I'll be like, okay, fine. You're right. You know who I do this with the most?
Who?
My husband. All the time. He'll say something like, super skeptical of that. And we've gotten to the point now where he'll be like, okay, all right.
Let's jump on. We're going to figure this out right now.
And he's the same as me. Well, he'll be like, okay.
Right.
I guess you knew what you were talking about, you know, whatever.
Right.
But you don't have to already know to say that.
Yeah.
So don't feel like you have to control the conversation too much.
Yep.
You can admit if you're not sure. You can admit if you're skeptical. Especially if it's someone you're friends with. You could just have more conversation. In fact, there's a benefit to letting it be a series of conversations. Like we have said before, most of the work is done in between conversations, letting people kind of sit with something.
This is real. This is kind of similar to something you said earlier. It's like I've been tempted sometimes to just pretend like I don't know something just to earn a second conversation.
Oh.
Because I will be more likely to change their mind in the second conversation than the first. I don't do that.
No,
but I can understand
you can see where there's a utility to some of these things.
Like, ooh, I love it when they stump me.
Unfortunately, the answer is kind of, well, what's the context of the conversation? Is this someone you know? Is this online? Is this in person? What are they acting in good faith? I took it to mean online, someone's being a jerk because that's where we live, right? And in that case, you could just say something like, well, I was talking about this and this is where I'm at. Or I'll say, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll ask, someone will make a claim. I'll make a counter. They'll say something else. I'll ask a question and then they'll change the subject. And then what I'll say, and I know this isn't your MO, but I'll be like, so you don't want to answer the question, huh? That's okay. I get it. I got it.
I think at some point they probably deserve some version of that. I'm not completely opposed.
Like, so you don't want to answer the question? I don't blame you. I understand. But by the way, when I say that, I'm done with the conversation.
Right.
I'm not even. I don't even care. It's done.
This is your closing line or whatever. So like an example would be if they bring up like back alley abortion.
Okay.
Right. And it's like, okay, that is not on the topic of whether or not the unborn is a person. So there's it feels like a distraction kind of a thing.
Right.
Then one direction you can go, this isn't the direction that we train people to do, but you could kind of say, okay, but imagine for a second that if you agreed with me that abortion was kind of like killing toddlers, or basically the same morally as killing toddlers, and in
it's an approximation.
The morally relevant ways, outside of her intent and knowledge and things like that. Then the fact that making it illegal would make it more dangerous to do that isn't going to completely change my mind.
Right. See, again, everything you're just saying sounds like it would work in person. Because I have done...
At least more likely.
I did that yesterday.
Really?
On Twitter. And it was an unbelievable disaster. Unbelievable.
What happened? You want to do an autopsy on what happened yesterday?
I'll tell you what happened. Okay. I did it on Twitter. Okay. I just told you what happened. It was on Twitter.
No, tell me the story.
Okay, the story is... Hold on.
Let's do it.
Oh, I will tell you exactly what happened. I can't decide.
Can you tell that we didn't plan to do this?
I can't decide if I am amused or annoyed. I guess I could be both. Yeah. So yesterday on Twitter, and I often do this, I will put PC and PL for pro-choice and pro-life, and I'll do like a sample conversation. Sometimes it's a real conversation I've had. Sometimes it's partly real, partly what I would have liked to say, whatever.
Yeah.
This one was very short. The pro-choice person says, and this is a real question I've gotten multiple times.
Okay.
I get that you personally wouldn't get an abortion, but why wouldn't you want to keep the legal option available for yourself? Sincere question. Had multiple times.
Okay.
The pro-life response I put in the tweet. Okay. Imagine for a second that we're talking about your born children and tell me how the questions sound. Okay. You follow what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you understand, Josh, that I am using an analogy because I recognize that the person asking me this question does not share my foundational premises? And so I am using an analogy as a tool to try to help them imagine my foundational premises without actually having to hold them. Because you know what an analogy is.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. There's 48 comments on this tweet. Okay. I'm not saying they are all like this. And I don't read my Twitter responses. I read them like once or twice a week, usually, I think. There were two kinds of responses. By far, the most common response was, fetuses aren't born. You're using the words imagine and born because your arguments are imaginary. This just shows how much you don't understand, etc. Also, I hate you. Okay.
Wait. It shows how much you don't understand that because you think
I don't understand because I think fetuses are. I don't know. That's the most common one. Fetuses aren't born. Quote tweet. See, they can't tell the difference, and etc. etc. Okay. Look, I expect garbage on Twitter. I do, but even I was like, not even.
Yeah.
Like one. Yeah. I didn't read every single one. There could have been one. That was the most common. The second most common one, distant second, I would say most common, was basically they recognized that I was using an analogy, right? And they would say, I don't agree that fetuses have the same moral statuses as born people. And, and I don't, or these are other things I don't agree with, or these are where I disagree with you, which irritates me because the premise of this particular conversation is that you asked me. You asked me.
Right.
So are you complaining that you asked me my perspective, I told you what it was, and your response is, that's not my perspective? Yeah, I know, dude. I know it's not your perspective. So then, if you'll indulge me, instead of responding to all of those comments, which were largely of the same type, pro-choice person, what do you think of XYZ? Pro-life person, here is an analogy for me to explain. Pro-choice person, that's an analogy and not the literal situation. Pro-life person, yes, do you know how analogies work? Pro-choice person, that also doesn't reflect my assumptions and priorities. Pro-life person, yes, because you asked me what I thought.
Yeah.
And this is why we are not the same group. Okay. And you know what? The good news is I'm telling you all the obnoxious stuff, but it got, hundreds of likes and a whole bunch of retweets. And my target, who do you think my target audience is for that tweet? The original tweet.
Pro-lifers.
Yeah. This is one thing you might say in this conversation in real life, with people. Because when I get that question, it's from people I know who are genuinely, I don't get it, right?
Right.
That's who it's for. It's not for my 13 super dedicated Twitter trolls who want to let me know that they disagree with literally every single thing that I say. All of it. All of it.
All right. So for what it's worth, I basically agree with your analysis in general of what is going on and what the problem. And your snarky closing tweet there is doing a good job of highlighting sort of like the problems that were happening here.
Maybe not.
A few things that, especially in person, but even on Twitter, that I would have done just a little bit differently. Not way differently.
It's fine. Go ahead.
But it's a little bit differently. So I've got an article I wrote a long time ago because I felt like I am seeing this trend, and it might be anecdotal, but I feel like a trend I've seen is that people are getting worse at tracking with analogies, which is super bad news.
Oh, okay.
For everything philosophy. And so I wrote an article like, here's like some practical tips when you use analogies to try to make it less likely that they misunderstand you. You have to kind of spell it out for them.
I am not saying these are identical. I'm just trying to illustrate this one aspect.
Right. So there's just again, as it kind of goes back to that, there's a reason why we don't use very many sound bites and we use sometimes a lot of language when we're explaining our positions, because I'm just trying to make it as hard as possible for them to accidentally
The goal is for you to
strawman
actually get what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would have done a little bit more of setup work on the analogy, but the analogy was exactly fair and exactly right.
Yeah.
So when the first response to the guy was like, but I'm talking about born people, right? So it's like totally not tracking with the analogy.
You said the words imagine and born, and it totally shows that you have to use imaginary situations in order to make the pro-life case.
Yeah. So that person I have less sympathy with than I do the second group of people. Of all the people who are struggling to track with philosophy and analogies, this one is like on the kind of extreme kind of, it's like, are you trying to misunderstand me? Because if your actual view is that pro-lifers, and I actually got a comment like this recently too, there's functionally, pro-lifers are just so confused about fetal development. I'm like, is that really the most plausible of all the options? You think that people that think about abortion all the time are so confused about how fetal development works that it's like, really?
They think embryos have hearts, so there's that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's pretty bad. And of course, I would have responded with a similar, again, this is an analogy.
Right.
I actually am aware that fetuses are not born. That's like,
in fact,
by definition.
That's actually why I said this.
Right.
Because I guess I skipped ahead to the part where I assume we both knew that we don't think the same thing.
Right.
Which is why you were asking me the question.
And no analogy is perfect. If it was, it wouldn't be an analogy anymore. It would just be the thing. Okay?
Right.
This is an analogy, and this is what I'm trying to say with it. Okay. For the second group, though, who are like, well, I don't think
that's not as bad because they're recognizing that
This is like exactly what I want them to say.
Right.
Because this means that then I get to say, totally. So let's talk about that.
Yes. And most of the time I agree with you. This is kind of a specific case where if you are asking me why I think what I do,
yes,
then I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to elucidate.
Right.
And so it's very irritating when you're like, why do you think this? I'm like, because of this. And you're like, I don't think that. Right. Okay, then leave.
I know that you don't think that. I want to learn more about what you think. Let's learn about what each other think.
Go talk to Josh
and make society
you sit
better.
Next to me, and I'll be like, I think this, and they'll have
you asked the wrong pro-lifers.
Go talk
basically
to Josh,
your answer.
okay?
And I'm not doing my social media conversation anyway, but I want to train people to do it like this, to be like, okay,
it's a whole different thing online. Yeah. It's a whole different thing.
So like the one of the charitable things I can say is, remember, these people are all being trained by the people that they pay attention to, probably, to do this thing, to just go find the easiest low-level way to attack the other person.
Sure.
And some of the most famous and popular pundits on both sides of politics do this all the time.
Because it works in terms of getting the views.
They've been trained badly. It's like in piano. Like I learned how to have the wrong hand position for so long that it just became integrated. And my piano teacher got to a point where she would not let me learn new songs until I fixed this fundamental thing.
And if their goal is to get more attention for what they're doing, they are right. There's a lot of research on Twitter specifically.
Yes.
Twitter specifically. And one of the things they found is, in terms of politics anyway, if you are saying negative things about the other side, that goes way more viral than saying positive things about your own side. Way more viral.
So there's a big problem with kind of how the incentives are set up in social media debate and politics and all these different things. And those are really, really huge problems that our society should be working really, really hard on fixing, because you're right. The incentives are not set up well. There's a reason why we are not a very popular, like a lot of things that we say are not that popular among pro-lifers.
Very long-winded and nuanced. And
because they want to just hear me dog on Planned Parenthood and how racist they are. That's why it's so good that
you guys have a TikTok, though.
That's true.
Your TikTok account is fabulous.
Finally, there's somewhere that people listen to.
Yeah, it's really good. It gives them the taste. Okay, that was not lightning.
That was not lightning, but that was fun. There's a live autopsy of a social media conversation that went badly.
Okay. Next one. This is an important one.
Yep.
Generally, we use the cessation of brain activity to indicate death.
Yeah.
So why not use brain activity to classify personhood?
I have a really fun story on this. Okay, so my first pro-life job after I had started a Teens for Life group and ran that for a couple of years and was basically just like going around speaking at like youth groups. I worked for Georgia Right to Life. It was like the state Right to Life group in Georgia. I worked there for about 4 years. I don't agree with a lot of the different things Georgia Right to Life does. I resigned in protest. I worked there for a while, and I'm glad I did, and it was helpful in different ways. While I was there, this was like the height of the stem cell research debate.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up having 2 different speeches on stem cell research plus a speech on human cloning.
Wow.
And I was doing that. I was kind of doing that a lot because for a while, that's what pro-lifers were most wanting to hear from, at least from someone like me who spent a lot of time basically trying to become one of the experts on this thing. There were a lot of different, like, kind of low-level, what, like, pro-lifers would say about stem cell research, and I was skeptical even then of, like, is that true?
Right.
And so I found a guy who does human embryonic stem cell research.
Okay.
His name is Dr. Steve Stice. For all I know, he still works at UGA.
Okay.
Which was like a 3 or 4 hour drive or something. But I got in touch with them and said, I would just love to meet with you and just ask you a bunch of questions because I'm skeptical of some of the things that pro-lifers say. I'm pro-life. I'm not coming in to change your mind, but I want to
reliable information.
Check.
Yeah.
And he was happy to have me. He let me in his office. I hung out there for 2 or 3 hours. He let me record the whole thing. I have no idea where the tape is, but I recorded the whole thing. And then I went to a talk that like his buddy gave, a really kind of offensive talk about cloning and how we should be mixing human and animal DNA and things like that.
He's taking it in one direction.
Yeah. But so Steve Stice, so his deal is he does a lot of animal cloning, and I will never forget when I asked him, what do you think about the whole like brain death thing and like the way that we define death? And his view, and I'm not saying this is all scientists' view,
right?
But what he said made a lot of sense to me as a non-scientist. He said, I think the definition of death has already changed once before, and I think it will change again, at least once again in the not so distant future.
Okay.
He said people used to think of death as basically be the heartbeat stop.
I mean, there's a lot of human history where once the heartbeat stopped, there was not anything else you could do.
Yes, and I mean it's usually right.
Yeah.
But now we don't. That's not the definition of death that doctors use. It has to do with permanent cessation of brain activity or whatever.
Right.
And he said, and that works a lot better than heart. There's a good reason for why that definition changed. But he said, I still don't think that we are using the correct definition of death.
Okay.
He said, because I can clone a bull hours after it's died. And he said, here's why. Because you need living cells to do it. So he says, what I can do is I can take living cells from a bull that has died. What happens right when it dies is those cells all stop talking to each other. They stop working together. But they don't die right away. Then there's just these living cells that are just kind of like out there for a little while. And then eventually the decomposition happens or begins. So he said, I can take from a dead bull a living cell hours later, clone the same basically bull. At least
not the same one, but yeah.
But same DNA or whatever. And do this thing. And so he said he thought that at some point the definition of death will be something along the lines of all of your cells stop working together. And he said that is the actual moment that death happens. And that, if that definition happened, that would more mirror the definition of when life began.
Right, when they all start working together.
Right. So at this point, yes, they don't mirror each other. I don't think they have to mirror each other, but it would make kind of at a
Yeah, there's the question of why they have to mirror each other in the first place.
It would make more sense if they mirrored each other, and his view makes sense to me.
Importantly, and I want to keep bringing this up so pro-lifers understand it, when we talk about the definition of death having to do with brain activity, it is the permanent cessation of brain activity.
Yes.
It is not just any cessation of brain activity. Yes. And we've talked about this many times before, but that also means, like, theoretically, if you had someone in a coma and you weren't sure they were coming back, if you had good evidence to suggest that they were, quote, coming back in the next 5 to 9 months, that would be a very different scenario than if they just didn't have any more brain activity.
All the doctors agree, look, like, basically the only thing keeping this person alive is machines.
So when we think about brain death, it's not just about what the brain is doing this moment. It's about our expectations about into the future. Then there's also the issue of why not do it when brain activity begins? What do you mean by the brain and brain activity?
Yeah.
Different species have different brains and different abilities. Humans have some very specific ones. Do you mean only when it's human specific? Do you just mean when there's any kind of brain functioning at all? Do you know how early neural development starts? It's basically right away. It's not so simple as this soundbite, which, I mean, practically goes without saying.
And it's like, look, a lot of times I'll say it like, for the first few weeks of your life, you can do something super cool. You can live without a heartbeat. Like, you can't do that now, but in the beginning, you don't need it. In the very beginning, your body is basically all stem cells that are multiplying rapidly.
Well, and just so you know, before the heart develops, you do have blood circulation.
Yes.
But you are so small.
Like, you don't need a heart to do it.
You don't. Right. And then once you start, and it happens very quickly, once you start to get big enough where that's not happening efficiently, the purpose of the heart starts to become apparent, and then the heart is there. I'm not saying, like, magically it's there, but I'm just saying
it develops.
Just to underline too, because we talk about this a lot with embryonic hearts and heartbeats. It's not like the heart is some magical personhood, giver.
Right.
But the heart represents increased development, increase what you need. But
it's
even
harder to say that something is not biologically alive when it has a heart.
Yeah, people are not into that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So that's basically what I said. I don't think your brain, currently operating is necessary for personhood. Just like I don't think a heartbeat is necessary for personhood. I'm interested
but they are
in
indicators.
Do you have a living organism here?
Right.
Is what I'm interested in.
Right.
And we can tell when that thing is alive, and we can tell when that thing is dead, and it would not surprise me if the definition of death changes in my life.
I had not heard that story before.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it is. I love this one also. Okay. Talk about how counseling or safe space sharing looks for post-abortive women who are atheist or agnostic. I'm aware of secular pro-life counseling, but I'm not privy to what they would recommend. Okay,
this one's all you.
Very important. Very important. Okay, I have a lot of things to say. I'll try to make it lightning round. So essentially, first of all, women who are not religious are disproportionately likely to get abortions. Okay, and by that, to be very clear, I mean, like, let's say 3% of the population is atheist, and I'm making this number up, but that means that if only 6% of women who get abortions are atheists, that means double represented, right? That's what we're talking about. Disproportionately likely to exist in pro-choice circles.
Yep.
I think even well-meaning pro-choice people are more likely to not expect people to have a lot of mental and psychological struggles, and I don't think it's a mystery as to why. There's a lot of discussion of belittling that this even happens, right?
Right.
So you have this issue where you have women who do not have religious backgrounds or religious interests more likely to have abortions, less likely to be in social situations that might be supportive of helping them deal with that. And another thing I want to say, it's not specific to abortion. Miscarriage has similar problems. It really does. And I want to take a moment to talk about that, especially as a secular person. So my son was a twin. We lost the twin. I grieved very hard. I could tell when it was first happening, there were things going on with me psychologically and mentally that I recognized as problematic. Not behaviors, but like reactions from long ago. I won't drag you through it, but long ago and far away, I had mental health issues because of other things that I went through, and I got therapy and I got better. And it had been like over 10 years. And now I'm starting to recognize these same reactions. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's just get ahead of this right now. So I was like, I need to find, I'm going to find professional help right now.
Good for you.
Right. While I was trying to do that, I also sought support groups online. And the first support group, there are a lot of miscarriage support groups online. And it's very important because miscarriage is a sort of silent, and I think there's parallels here to abortion. Yeah. Miscarriage is this sort of silent, overlooked thing. It's confusing. It's difficult to understand. So I joined a couple of different pregnancy loss support groups with very common themes of women feeling like they had no one in their real life to talk to, feeling like people didn't understand how big of a deal it was. And then they find solidarity here, which is wonderful. Thank God for the internet in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
The first few groups I joined, they weren't overtly religious groups. It's just that a lot of the women in them were religious. And there was lots of content of, I know I'll see my baby again in heaven someday. And they'll talk about God has a bigger plan. And maybe this is because something better is coming along. And I don't begrudge them that. I would not take away anybody's processing that's helping them.
Right.
But that actually makes it worse for me.
Right.
I hate hearing it. Hate it. And so I'm not going to rain on their parade, but I was like, this is not helping. And so I made a post saying, hey guys, I'm an atheist and I'm kind of looking for something different. And they were super, super nice. And they were like, oh, there's actually, specifically, there are miscarriage groups for non-religious people. And here's a couple of them you can join. So I did. And then in those groups, they didn't have, very much of that at all. In fact, they had people complaining about that. And so there was solidarity there.
Yeah.
But interestingly, in those groups, so the pregnancy loss groups I joined originally that had the religious content, they had certain rules you had to look at before you join because they're trying to make it a safe, space. And one of them was like, we're not going to argue about abortion.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that makes sense.
Understandable.
Yeah. The secular pregnancy loss groups I joined, their rule was this is a pro-choice group.
Oh.
It was not, we're not going to argue about it. It is, we can talk about it if you're pro-choice. And we don't want to hear about it otherwise. And I am not telling anyone how to grieve or how to feel about their abortion or their miscarriage at all. It varies.
Yeah.
But it is very difficult for me to understand how you could have just gone through a loss of a very wanted child. And to be really clear, and pro-lifers and pro-choicers don't understand this. At least in these groups, you're looking at a lot of secular and often pro-choice women who are grieving the loss of their child. They are not grieving potential. Some of them are. I'm not going to talk for literally everybody, but it is so common for me to hear people on both sides say, well, you're grieving that lost future. You are, but you're also grieving the actual child that existed. Yeah. Not just like this idea that you're sad isn't happening. Okay. And pro-choice women do it too. And I really think it's important for everybody, but in this case, pro-lifers to understand that. Okay. I'm not asking you to say that you think it makes sense, but it is a fact. It is a fact.
Yeah.
And we need to keep that in mind. Anyway, the reason I bring all that up is because finding secular resources to deal with reproductive loss is tricky. And for women who have had abortions and are grieving or have other mental health issues because of it, it's even, I think, probably trickier if they're pro-choice because there's also like, are you allowed to feel this way? There's some people that call it the no crying zone. Like you feel like you're not allowed to express this because then you're undermining the cause, that kind of thing, right? All that said, we have people contact us regularly. Usually it's not the woman themselves. Usually it's someone who knows them and is like, hey, do you have any resources for my friend who's going through this? And unfortunately, there are not many. The vast majority of post-abortion healing-based groups are very religious. And fine. But that's a problem for some of the reasons I just mentioned, or for sometimes it requires, needing God's forgiveness. Sometimes it requires all these different things. It's not gonna work, We are trying to develop other resources. It's a very long-term, very background thing. I'm not going to get into it right now.
Sure.
We're not that big of a group. We're trying to work with some people,
right.
But in the meantime, I will tell you that first of all, you can seek an individual therapist. Now, this is a tricky thing, and we just did a post about this recently about how to do this, okay? It is not uncommon for people who get abortions to get therapy privately. It's not uncommon at all, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean you regret it, don't regret it, or whatever you feel. That's not the point. But if you want to find what we are calling a narrative neutral therapist. So there are therapists who they think that the best way to help you is to affirm that this was the decision you had to make and this was right for you and it's okay, right? And maybe for some people that's helpful to them. But there are a lot of people, and this is another parallel with miscarriage. In miscarriage, there are so many well-meaning people who will say things to minimize your loss because they think that will make you feel better.
Yes.
They think it's okay for you. This isn't a big deal. Don't be sad. It's not a big deal, essentially. And they don't understand, like, I am sad.
Yeah.
I'm already sad. It is a big deal to me. I get what you're trying to do, but all you're doing is make me feel like I can't talk about this because I shouldn't be sad. Right. Okay? Very, very common. Anything about the gestational age, it was really early. anything like that. And there's an equivalent. I think there's an equivalent in abortion where it's like, you don't need to be sad. You had to do this. It's the right thing. And you're trying to help. And I'm not saying that never helps anybody, right? But we are trying to help people find narrative neutral therapists, which is people who they're not going to put what they think about politics, about religion, about abortion. They're just going to find out where you're at and work with you. And to be super clear, because obviously we're very pro-life, we are not trying to help you find someone who will convince you to be pro-life. We are trying to help you find someone who will work with you where you're at. Yeah. So we have a list of screening questions you can ask. Do you recognize trauma after abortion in the first place? A lot of therapists do, even if like their official organizations have one thing or another to say about it, because they've worked with, they've seen it, Ask them if they recognize it. Ask them, if they can keep their religious beliefs out of it, if they can keep their politics out of it. If you're looking at a narrative neutral therapist, they'll be like, yeah, this is about helping you with your therapy, right? So you can seek that. There is also a group called Support After Abortion. They do have a lot of religious resources, but they also do have secular resources. And we've just learned of them kind of recently. And so there's also that. There's also a group, this is a more niche thing, but there's a group called Little Souls at Rest. And I know it has the word souls in it, but it doesn't have to be religious. And their whole thing is not therapy, but if you are dealing with a situation where you have remains at all, they will work with hospitals and funeral homes and graveyards, and mostly they do it for women with miscarriage, but they have women who've had abortions who also reach out to them and they are not going to delineate between whether it's a miscarriage or abortion, whether it's fetal anomaly or elective. That's not their thing. They're not here to figure out why this happened. They're here to help you if you need to find a resting place, if you need, and you don't have to be religious. It's just if you need a process, if you need a ritual to work through, they will help you with that. They have contacts in multiple states and they're expanding. Wow. And they're completely volunteer led, and all donations are to help people get this done. All resources out there, because it is a particular kind of set of issues when you have secular people struggling, whether it's miscarriage or abortion. And how to work through that with them. And I have had Christians suggest that maybe the best way to help them is to help them find Christ. And I'm sure that has happened. I'm sure that has happened, but that's just not the focus right now.
That's not a quick thing. Even if an atheist becomes a Christian down the road, you think that's going to be like, what, they're going to do that tomorrow and now they can
again,
like,
these people are trying to help, where they're like, if you can find Christ and find healing and I appreciate the motivation. Right. But that's not the thing right now. Right now there's this more immediate logistical thing and it's a huge need. I think I told you in an earlier episode we recorded about an article I was reading where the abortion provider was talking about the way some women respond. And one woman asked if she could have the remains. And by the way, just quick side note, in cases of miscarriage, and I expect also in some cases of abortion, wanting to keep the remains is common. It is normal. It is a very, I don't mean keep them in a jar on your shelf. I mean, have them to have a process, have them to have a cremation or a burial or something. It's common. It is very normal. And people need to recognize that. There was a tweet when people try to get gotchas about abortion and by accident run over miscarriage, which happens kind of a lot. And I think almost everyone who does it didn't even think about it. They weren't even meaning to, right? But there was a tweet I saw recently, and it wasn't just some rando. It was like had thousands of likes, where he's like, we know that people don't really think life begins at conception. You know why? Because there are so many miscarriages every year, and I have never been invited to a funeral for a miscarriage.
Oh my!
And when he said that, there was just
so many levels,
like hundreds of comments from pro-life and pro-choice people who were like, "This is not the way, not the way." And there were people like, "I've been to funerals for miscarriage. Maybe there's reason people don't invite you." You know,
right?
And all this stuff, and it was stunning. The stories. There was one woman who talked about. She's like, "My mother buried the miscarried remains of her child in her backyard. And then years later, when we had to move, she had a nervous breakdown." Dude, you are walking into the wrong territory. Yeah. Just turn around. And by the way, that tweet was deleted. This happens regularly. Okay. There's a lot of parallels here. I understand from the abortion debate, from the pro-life perspective, I am not saying there's no daylight between abortion and miscarriage.
Sure.
Super not saying that.
Sure.
But in terms of the way people react and process and the complexity and there's no wrong or right way to grieve and all that stuff and the resources and everyone having their idea of how you should feel and what you should think, especially people who've never gone through it, like lots of parallels, I think, in that regard.
That was just the one thing I was going to add is, can we stop telling people how they're supposed to feel? Like, just stop. Just please stop that. There's a reason that therapists don't do that.
And for the record, by the same token, I'm not pretending that every single person who has a miscarriage grieves it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's very common.
People are complicated.
Yeah.
All right. The only other question we had on here is someone asked about the situation with the 10-year-old rape victim. I'll just point to
that whole thing.
We did, I think, maybe one of our best podcasts with a mutual friend of ours, Robin Atkins.
She's amazing.
On that, who was wonderful. I'm just going to point people to that. She had a lot of really helpful things to say. That was a very strange day or two for us because we were kind of stunned by what some research...
Well, and you were kind of trying to react in real time, too.
Yeah. We recorded it pretty quickly after it happened. And so there was research going like the night before, and it was kind of shocking to, well, at least Emily and I.
Right.
And so...
Probably not Robin.
I will... it wasn't actually surprising to Robin because he has so much more experience with this very specific thing, but we didn't.
Right.
So people would be surprised by some of the things that we learned. And so he had lots of tips for how to talk about that. I will link to it in the description.
Yes.
We did it.
We did it.
Lightning round done.
Slow motion lightning round complete.
Right.
Yeah.
We did it. Thanks for doing it with me.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to the Equipped for Life podcast, a project of Equal Rights Institute. Equal Rights Institute uses speaking, writing, YouTube videos, podcasts, online courses, and campus outreach to help pro-life advocates in the areas of practical dialogue tips, relational apologetics, pro-life philosophy, and sidewalk counseling. If you've been helped by this podcast, please consider supporting it by making a donation at equalrightsinstitute.com.